Um, so everybody else that's participating in an event is building a sense of community together. Things that you're doing and killing together, everybody's getting rewarded for it. The events become more difficult as more players are around. So as you see other players in a map, you're excited about it. You're really excited to see other players come up and join you. Instead of in a traditional MMO, where if you see other players, you're upset because they're going to come over, they're going to steal your loot, they might steal your kills to prevent you from completing a quest. So dynamic events is the number 2 area that we're trying to innovate. The third area we're focusing on innovation is combat, and I'm going to let John talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah. I don't hear anything. Sorry, Colin. Yeah, so combat. Colin talked about that social thing, and while we talk a lot about our combat being really active too, I think another really, really important thing that we're trying to do with the combat is make it social as well. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm pretty tired of looking for groups. I'm pretty tired of homing projectiles, shooting at me, not being able to dodge out of the way, and all that stuff. And I think I'm pretty tired of clicking on red bars, watching red bars go up and down, and pressing buttons and pressing 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 3 1 1 1 1 2. It's getting pretty old, and so we think it's kind of time for a change for that. And that's what the combat is all about. There are different things that players need out of combat, and one thing that you want is players to be able to interact with each other, to have a role in combat, and to matter. And for a long time, that role has meant I'm either a healer, I'm a tank, or I'm a DPS, and that's all I can do. In fact, in Guild Wars 2, everyone can do all those things, and we expect you to do all of them within a single fight sometimes, and certainly as you're going through the game. And that is not the role that you play. The role that you play is how you do it, and not what you do. The distinction is, look at our professions, the Guardian. He's all about controlling area. He's about laying things down, making people move out of places, controlling the ground, taking over the areas of the battlefield. The Thief, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of that. He's making you turn around, look, he's moving in, moving out. And it's a much more interesting thing to deal with making a profession choice and who you bring based on their play style and based on who you want to play with and not who you have to play with. We don't want to make sure that people are playing with their friends. If you have 5 friends and you guys all want to play warriors, then you should all be able to play warriors. It shouldn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you have 5 warriors or 5 guardians. The game is about playing with people who you want to play with. So the same thing with that. We talk a lot about the dodging and the active combat. It's one of those subtle things that, actually, even at work, we haven't really figured out how it all works yet. The whole shooting a projectile and guys getting in the way. You don't really realize what that means until you've played the game for a few months and you start thinking about, I'm fighting these 2 creatures and I'm shooting that. I'm actually not shooting the guy in the back. This guy in front of me is in my way. These bullets are hitting him. I have to move out of the way. I have to actually do something to do what I want to do in combat. And it takes a while. I mean, you've all seen the YouTube videos. It takes a while for people to learn that. They're kind of stuck in their ways and standing around shooting. And, once you start to get used to the game, you realize just how different all that stuff is. And, I think we have the Thief videos here that we can kind of give you a nice idea of what that means. This stuff is all in-game. This isn't fake. It's not some sort of rendered thing. This is what the game plays like, especially once you know what you're doing. So.
play an Asura thief after watching that. It's pretty awesome, huh? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We know you guys have a lot of questions, so as you can see in the center here, we have a microphone for your speaking pleasure. Sir, you got your hand raised. Why don't you start the party off right here?
Question. I just want to say thank you. Because for the longest time, I've been trying to find an MMO that's actually good. I played Guild Wars 1 and I did like that because it was free and it was low level cap of 20, but there was a lot to do. But this is exactly what I've been waiting for, and I'm definitely pre-ordering this, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
In the skill videos, the tune does some vocalizations, emotes, the I am so stunning, that's where it's done. How do you call those up? Is that an emote command or is it automatic?
So there are about 400 lines for every player, and they're all in combat. It's all voiced, and there's a system that determines when to play them. It's not as often as we show in the videos. I know people like to complain about that. We also, you can't turn them off. I think we're going to be able to turn them down for how often they are, kind of a slider. But the idea is that there's just some, they just bring a lot of character to your character.
So something to add to that real quick too. We talked a little bit about how Guild Wars 2 doesn't have traditional quests and there's no giant blocks of text you need to read. We've recorded over 60 feature films worth of dialogue in Guild Wars 2. So wherever you go, you can hear characters talking and you can become immersed in the world through the spoken dialogue.
I just recently got done with the Rift beta, and one thing I noticed that was kind of a really big hindrance for me was they're big events that you guys talk about you having in your game as well. Were very pertinent and were a lot of fun and were an important point to the game. But the moment you moved out of a separate area, you didn't know they existed anymore. Do you have something in place to kind of keep everyone globally aware of these events as they're going on, or what do you think about that?
All right, so there's nothing else in the game. That persistent world, it is dynamic events. There are over 1,000 of them in the game, and that's the whole point of the game, is to bring people together for these things. And I think that's an important distinction. Probably the biggest one that's easy to overlook is that when you're playing the game, you're not worried about what, your task of 40 quests that you have to kill a bunch of dudes is. Like, what you're doing is you're just out in the world exploring and bumping into these things. And so there's never, I moved out of the area where this is. They're not like random and they happen somewhere where you aren't, right? They're very, very scripted and very planned, and the whole thing is planned to create this experience. I don't know, Colin?
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I've got something to add there too. As you participate in these events, you can leave the area. You don't have to finish every event. You can basically fight the cutthroat pirates for a while, and then get called away by something else. Your participation is still there. So when the event resolves, you still get rewarded. You don't have to go cash in with anybody. You don't have to hang around and wait for the event to finish in order to get a reward.
As far as dynamic events go, I realize this is kind of an old example, but something like Tabula Rasa, you liberate the city. Okay, now I can go ahead and get these quests. I went and did this quest, came back 20 minutes later, the city was taken over again. I had to go redo it all over again in order to turn it in. I realized that the turning quest element isn't in there, but when the centaurs attack, is that going to be something that happens, every 20 minutes?
So the events in the game do run on cycles. They are part of event chains. So I talked about that Centaur example earlier where they attack the city and all these events chain out from there. As the event chains and you completely liberate the city and complete the chain will restart at some point. Unfortunately, we can't make unlimited content that only runs one time. We would need about 10,000 game designers to make that happen. But we do try to make it so that they don't run constantly. Some of you guys may have played our demo down on the show floor. We've got the event times tweaked up, running faster than they normally will, just to make sure that there's enough stuff for you guys to really get a taste of what all the events are like. Normally they would run a little slower than that. The idea is that you shouldn't see the same event all the time, but as you're exploring through a map, you may see the same event happen occasionally. Most importantly, we want it to feel like if you're exploring through the world and going to different places, you're going to see different things going on. The world's going to feel like it's alive, and it's going to feel like if you play through a map twice, you might be able to see completely unique content each time you're playing through our dynamic event system.
So you guys may not know this, but over an hour before, you had the lineup almost full. So I think when you bring this back home to Seattle, you guys need to be in the main theater because you will fill it. Now my question is about escaping the same fate that many recent MMOs have, which is how do you keep people playing once they've gone through all the content?
There is a ridiculous amount of replay value and endgame in Guild Wars 2. So just to get started, we talked about how when you play a character through the game, you have a unique personal story that branches and changes, and every race has different stories that they can do. So first off, when you're done, when you get to the end of your personal story with one character, you can make another character and play through the game and experience a completely unique, different personal story if you want. When you're doing that and you're playing through the game, you're going to experience completely unique and different dynamic events as a result of that as well. As you go through maps you may have gone through already, you're going to have different content going on. Those maps are going to be in different states. So that right there is just a ton of replay value unto itself. On top of that, we have dungeons in the game, which are 5-man organized party content. The dungeons have a story version that you can do. When you've completed the story version of the dungeon, it unlocks the repeatable version of the dungeon that you can do. And the repeatable versions of the dungeons all have multiple paths through them you can take. So when you get into the dungeon and you start playing through it, you can choose to go down one path and experience completely different content than if you go down a different path. It's not like a traditional MMO dungeon where you load in and you have one linear path and that's what you experience. You have completely different things you can do in each one of these dungeons. So there's a lot of replay value at the end of the game that comes with that. Another thing we have is all of the major cities in the game have tons of mini games in them that you can go do for fun whenever you want. The human city has a perpetual bar brawl where you can go in and brawl other people with bottles and chairs and throw kegs at them. The Norn city has a game called Keg Brawl, which is kind of a mix between soccer and football and a little bit of basketball. Yeah, rugby, there you go. And it's 5-on-5, Norn trying to get kegs back to their brewers, and so you're throwing the kegs back and forth to each other. You can dump the ale on the ground and make people slip and fall down. We have all sorts of mini games like this all throughout the game that you can do, that you can go compete with people for fun, try to get high scores. So that's another piece of content that's available to you at the end game. Two more key things that are available there is our PvP. The first is competitive PvP, which is 5-on-5, highly organized PvP. That comes in the rated version where if you're really great at the game, you can compete against each other and compete for prizes and do tournaments and all sorts of stuff. And then it has hot joinable PvP where you literally, just like a first-person shooter, you can jump right into a game and start playing against people. You bring up a server browser, you see the games that are going on, you go into the game type you want to play, and you just start playing instantly. So we're doing a lot with our PvP in that aspect. The other thing we're doing with PvP that's going to be a huge piece of endgame is world versus world PvP. This is gigantic, unbalanced PvP. This is 30 people could be fighting 300 at once. This is your server matched up against 2 other servers at the same time. This goes back to our point we made earlier about